Hi, this is Vicki Romaine with Cheerful Greetings, and today we're going to make this little journal. I have the three signatures here, and this is from all these pages are from a 6x6 pad, and they all came from the same pad, and they are stained looking because I dipped each sheet into a pan of coffee and let it stain my papers. And they're nice and crinkly. And I love the design on some of the pages because I dried them on a little table uh, that had open slots. It was a metal table. And you can see here some of the design from the table on my journal. And I really like that. This time I wanted to do it outside rather than um, put my papers in the oven. So here's my signature, and as I said, it's from a 6x6 pad. So let's put these together, and we will make a spine for it. And I'm just kind of holding it up to my mat here to get a measurement, and it looks like I'll need a spine that's about a half an inch wide, and then of course it'll be a little over 6 inches long. I have never made a hidden spine journal before, but we're going to try to make one today, and hopefully I will learn from my mistakes and you can see what maybe not to do. So we're going to start from scratch and see what we can come up with. I have this manila folder here that I'll be using for the cover. And if you will notice, it is larger than my 6x6, so I'll be cutting it down quite a bit. The first thing I'm going to do is cut the edges that are not even off so that I can have a straight edge to work with. I'll pull out my very large cutting board, and first thing I'm going to do is cut this edge off. I want it to be straight across, so we're going to cut the tabs. Before I cut the tabs though, I think I'll cut my file folder in half here using the fold line in the middle of the file folder as my cutting point. Now I'm cutting the little edge off here that it's not straight. It has a little scallop top, so I'm cutting that piece off. And then I'll be turning my file folder around and I'm going to cut the tabs off so that it will be even. Now that I have all straight edges, I'm going to be doing some scoring. The first one is at 1.5. The second one at 4 3/4. Next, it's 5 1/4. Then 8.5. Then at 10. Okay, I'm going to give you the measurements again for the scoring, and that's at 1.5, 4 3/4, 5 1/4, 8.5, and lastly at 10. Now the 10 scored area is to be cut off. Therefore, the width of your manila folder should be 10 inches after you get through doing all the scoring, because you're going to cut on that scored line at the 10th inch. What I did next was fold like manila folder so I'd have an idea of what it was going to look like. And if you will notice in the center, you have a 1/2 inch spine. You have some scrap manila folder that you cut off. Take that scrap and cut you 2 1/2 inch pieces. Now that 1/2 inch, make it a skimpy 1/2 inch. You don't want it to go over the fold line, so you need to have it just a tad shorter or smaller than 1/2 inch. What I did not film was that I had trimmed my manila folder height-wise to 6 1/4. My pages for my little journal are 6 inches. They're from a 6-inch pad. But I wanted my cover a little larger than the pages. So I cut it off so that I would have a cover of 6 1/4 inches. And part of that I used to cut my spine. What I've done now is burnish all my score lines. And I have my spine where I can really see where it goes. I'm taking one of the pieces I just cut, it's a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to lay it over the spine area of my manila folder. I'm using Allen's tacky glue. It's in a container with a small hole for the top. Now I want to make sure that my spine does not go over the folds. I want to be able to open and close my book easily. I want to make sure it's straight and within that spine area completely. My little piece that I'm using on my spine is longer than 6 1/4 inches, so I'm just clipping it off to match my cover. So it's the same size now as my cover. As you can tell, I'm working my folder now with the piece in it, trying to get the spine sharp. I want it to have a sharp fold there. Now, if I were making a regular journal with a sewed-in signature, I would be making that sewing stitch right on this. But I'm not. I'm going to do a hidden stitch, so it will be a little more involved. Now, I'll be skipping a lot of the steps, but telling you what I've done, so the video won't be too terribly long. Now I've got a piece of cardstock here. Actually, it's designer paper, but it's fairly thick. And I'm going to use it to put my other strip on. This is the place that I will be sewing my signature. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now and set it aside. And what I'm doing is marking the center of this piece of cardstock. I want my manila folder strip to go right down the center. So I'm just making a couple of dots on the back so I'll know where to place it. This is how it will go inside the cover. However, I'm not ready to put it in yet. I've got to put the cover on the outside and figure out how wide I want this, because I don't think I want it quite this wide. The signatures will be sewn into this piece of manila folder before it is glued to the cover. This is the piece I'm going to be using for my outside cover. So I'm going to cut it 10 by 6 1/4, because I'm going to cover the pockets with this paper just as well as the back side. Now I have glued my paper on the back of my cover, and now I want to make kind of a faux spine on the outside. Excuse me. So I decided to use this little contrasting paper, same color scheme, but it's a lighter color, and I'm going to use it for my faux spine. If you noticed when you did your scoring, the first score mark was 1.5 inches, and the last score mark was 1.5 inches further than the previous one. So therefore, we have a area, if we fold it over, will be our 2 pockets. Notice I did not glue the pockets down. That will be done at a later time. I'm trying to decide here whether to put a small piece of designer paper on each side of my spine, inside spine that is, or whether I should put the whole sheet. And I'm going with the whole sheet, and then I'll put the spine piece on top of all of it. I'm cutting the light colored checkered designer paper 7 by 6 1/4. Now on that 7th, you may have to trim it down just a little bit because you want your pocket to fold over without making the designer paper buckle. So you want to bring it up to the fold of the pocket, but not over it. And it's not going to be seen anyway because it's going to be in the pocket. So you want to make sure it's just to the edge of the lower part of the pocket and not over the entire thing. That's why it's 7 inches instead of 10, because your pockets are 1.5 inch each. But you need to trim it down just a little bit so that you can fold your pocket over. You don't want any puckering. The designer paper is in, and I have glued the pockets down and put clips at the corners so it will help the glue to set up. I see how wide the paper is that I have the spine on, and it's too wide. So after I get my signatures sewn in, I will be cutting this down because I don't like the way the inside looks. I want it to be much neater than this. Now we get to the nitty-gritty of the tutorial. You do this with each of the 3 signatures. Now, I take all my pages for one signature and put them in on top of each other. And then I open it up. In this particular case, green is the center of the signature. What I'm doing now is punching a hole in my pages. It'll go all the way through, and I'm punching them at the middle and at the top. I'm using a box, so there is a place for the pen to go through without ruining the furniture or my hand or something else. So that's why I'm using a box. Now I have 3 holes in there. And if you notice in the center, I have a piece of manila folder that I've marked in 3 spots. See the 3 dots? That's where I'm putting the holes because you want to do that in each one of them. Now I am taking my needle and putting some embroidery thread in. Even though I have a large needle, I'm finding it difficult to thread my needle. So let me give you a hint. If you happen to have a Twist-'em, peel the outside paper off your Twist-'em and use the thin wire that's inside. Bend it just a little bit, make a loop out of it, and it makes a perfect needle threader. Some of this was hard for you to see, so let me explain what I did. I took my needle and went down into the book at the middle point, and I pulled it out at the spine. And I left a couple of inches of my string to use for tying. I brought it to the outside and went up at the top. So I went in at the middle, came back through up at the top. Then I went all the way down to the bottom and went to the outside with my needle, and then came back in at the middle. So there's 2 strings in the middle, and 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom. After that is done, all of the threads are pulled taut, and you tie them off. I usually do a triple knot in the middle of mine. Hopefully it will not come loose. Now, if you'll see that my paper, my designer paper, is sticking out quite a bit next to the signature. So I'm going to be cutting some of it off after I put all 3 signatures in. Now I'm ready to do my second signature. Again, I will go to my little box and put 3 holes in it using my template as a pattern. I'm using the marks to punch the holes in. That way, the holes will be in the same 3 spots in each of these signatures. When I go down with my needle, I want to get as close to the center as possible. I'm using 3 paper clips or chip holders to hold my papers. I want them to stay together while I'm sewing my signature. Again, I will be marking my centers with the 3 spots again. You do this with each one of the signatures. Now I'm keep putting my two prickers and a needle in the holes to keep my papers together while I sew the signature. And this signature goes in just like the other one, down through the center from the inside. And you come out in the center of the manila spine. Then you come from the outside to the inside at the top. To finish the sewing, you go all the way up to the center again, from the outside to the center hole. And it is there where you tie it off. I usually use a triple knot to tie it off, and you pull off the string taut, so there's no play in the signature. Of course, the more signatures you have, the more difficult it is to get it all in place. But with a little effort, this can be done. To determine how much cording or string I am using, I usually measure from the top to the bottom of my journal about 3 times and then add just a little to make sure I have enough string to sew my journal. I want to have a little of it left over to not only tie off, but to hang down in case I want to put some charms or something at the bottom of my journal to hang down. All of my signatures have been sewed in now on the piece of spine and the designer paper. And there's my stitching, and my threads go from different colors, so that's why you'll see in different colors. It's a variegated thread. And my papers are in there fairly evenly, and they're on the piece of designer paper that I glued my spine on to begin with. The designer paper that is holding my spine is a little too wide for me, so what I'm going to do is take it over to the cutter and trim it down just a little bit. And all of my papers in are fairly neat. Each one is sewed in with a variegated color thread, and the papers are nice and crisp from being dyed. So I'm going to trim this piece of designer paper, and we'll put it inside the cover. And here's the spine itself. It's not real pretty, but this will be a hidden spine, so you won't see the actual stitching. My designer paper has been trimmed down now, and the only thing left to do is to glue it to the back of the cover, or to the inside of the cover. I'm going to use rubber cement to glue in my signatures. I like using rubber cement on items that I might need to adjust or move into place. It's easy to use a liquid glue when you want to do that. I want to have the flexibility of moving an object without it tearing the two pieces of cardstock or paper or whatever you're working with. The designer paper and hidden spine are just a little too long for the height of my journal. So after my journal sets up, I will go back and trim it to make it even with the cover. I hope you enjoy my tutorial. This is my little journal with the papers in it from a 6-inch pad, and I put a little sticker on the front that says framed, and all the papers are coffee dyed, and then nice and crisp and crunchy. And I have a hidden spine, which is the main thing I wanted to show you. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please come back and see me and see what I have in store for you for the next time. In the meantime, have a great crafting day, and don't forget, please subscribe.